She cleaned the floors every day. No one looked twice. No one knew her name. To the company, she was just another janitor. But then an executive got lost. No one could understand him. And it was she in flawless French who helped him. Then came Arabic, Japanese, German, 9 languages, one invisible woman, and a talent no one ever cared to see. This is the story of Sofia Morales, an immigrant, a single mother, a cleaner, but also a teacher, a linguist, a bridge between worlds. What happens when an entire company realizes that the brightest mind in the building had been silently mopping their floors? Watch until the end. This story will move you. And if you believe every voice deserves to be heard, subscribe to the channel right now, because here, every story is a reminder no one is born invisible. It's the world that chooses not to see. Sofia Morales walked through the still dark streets of Chicago, her gray uniform fitting neatly around her frame, her shoulders slightly hunched from the cold wind, and her old backpack weighing heavily on her back. That morning, her headphones played verses from a classical Arabic poem, a language she knew as intimately as the Spanish of her childhood, or the Portuguese she'd picked up out of necessity. This was her routine. At 5:40 a.m., while the city was just beginning to stir with horns and steam rising from the grates, Sofia was already crossing the wide avenues with steady steps, headed for Northbridge Technologies, one of the fastest-growing companies in the information technology sector. There on the 8th floor, she cleaned glass offices, meeting rooms, and executive suites, quietly, invisibly. To most people, she was just the cleaning lady. No one imagined that behind the calm, discreet eyes of that 44-year-old Latina immigrant lived a former university professor from Columbia, a graduate in applied linguistics with honors, a published author, and an international speaker. A woman fluent in 9 languages: French, Arabic, Japanese, English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish, and Mandarin. No one knew, and no one ever asked. Sofia had learned to smile with her eyes and lower her head when necessary. But more than anything, she had learned to listen. She listened to hurried footsteps, corporate conversations, accents stumbling over foreign words, awkward attempts to sound cosmopolitan. She listened and observed. She knew the company worked with contracts in Korea, investors in Germany, and startups in South America. And yet, not a single person there seemed to truly understand what a linguistic bridge was. People passed by her without a glance. Many clutched their bags a little tighter when she entered the elevator, or pretended not to hear her cheerful "Good morning." Sometimes she was barked at to clean faster. Other times simply ignored. Still, Sofia kept going. And every night, when she returned to her small apartment in Albany Park, where she lived with her daughter Elena, she didn't rest. While the girl did her homework, Sofia listened to linguistics podcasts, read technical articles, and watched educational videos with subtitles in different languages. At the center of the small, makeshift bookshelf between children's toys and stacked up bills sat her greatest treasure, a hard-covered red notebook. In it, she jotted down proverbs, new words, grammar structures, and phrases she overheard in the company's hallways. Divided by language, the notebook was an extension of Sofia's memory and hope, each page a silent reminder of who she truly was. Once a young intern sneered when he noticed her headphones. "Isn't that cleaning lady always listening to weird stuff?" "Probably soap operas," a co-worker replied with a laugh. But it wasn't a soap opera. It was a course on Ottoman Turkish verb declensions. Sofia didn't respond. She kept cleaning, just like always. Yet even in the face of indifference, there was a quiet strength in her. A resilience built through patience, study, and dignity. A woman who had lost much, but never gave up her identity. She was invisible to the eye, but immense in knowledge. That Thursday morning, something felt different in the air. The hallways were busier than usual. There were visitors in the lobby, people with temporary badges speaking in hushed voices, accents mixing in the air. As always, Sofia moved unnoticed among them, pushing her cleaning cart. But there was something new in the glances around her, something she couldn't quite name, but could feel like the sudden change in the wind before a storm. While picking up coffee cups from the meeting room, she caught the sound of a conversation in French with a heavy African accent. She recognized the tone, the vocabulary, the hesitant rhythm of someone trying to make themselves understood and without success. And in that moment, Sofia stopped. She didn't know that, from the glass mezzanine above, a watchful gaze had been silently following her. A man newly arrived at the company, observing everything, not with disdain, but with curiosity, with respect, with something close to awe. And Sofia, as always, didn't notice. She didn't know that from that moment on. Nothing would ever be the same again. The morning went on as usual at the Northbridge Technologies building. Elevators rising and falling without pause. Phones ringing in frantic patterns. Employees rushing by with coffee cups in hand. Outside, the snow was beginning to melt under the timid March sun. But inside, the cold remained. The cold of hierarchy, of haste, of indifference. Sofia Morales pushed her cart quietly across the lobby floor. Just like every Thursday, she wore her same freshly pressed grey uniform, her hair tied up in a simple bun, and a light scarf around her neck. A Christmas gift from Elena. She had just emptied the reception trash bin when she noticed the unusual tension near the elevators. A tall man, dark-skinned and visibly confused, was gesturing with his hands, speaking in heavily accented French. The front desk clerks looked at him awkwardly, offering forced smiles, shaking their heads, completely lost. Je cherche le bureau de l'administration internationale. S'il vous plaît, he asked, holding up a crumpled badge that read, Monsieur Ngolo Diarra. No one understood. Sir, do you speak English? One of the clerks asked again. He shook his head, trying to explain, but the barrier was clear. Voices rose, eyes began to gather, and discomfort spread like a quiet fire. That's when Sofia stepped in, unhurried, with the calm of someone who carries time in her pocket. She let go of her cart and, with a gentle smile, said, Bonjour, monsieur. Vous cherchez l'administration internationale? C'est au 8e étage. Je peux vous y accompagner si vous voulez. The effect was instant. The clerks froze. The crowd around them held their breath, and the visitor smiled relieved, as if he had finally found solid ground. Ah, merci beaucoup. Je suis un peu perdu ici. Mais vous êtes très gentille. Sofia simply nodded calmly, pointing the way. She grabbed her employee badge and passed through the turnstile, like it was the most natural thing in the world, because to her, it was. But at that moment, up on the glass mezzanine, someone was paying even closer attention. Jonathan Pierce, the new CEO of Northbridge, had arrived 2 days earlier. Young for the position, discreet, with a global background and a reputation for listening. As he was getting to know the company's layout, something about that scene stopped him in his tracks. Sofia's fluency, her posture, the way she handled the situation with such ease, and most of all, how she quietly vanished afterward, as if nothing had happened. He didn't know her name, but that moment would stay with him. Down below, the whispers began, subtle, buried under nervous chuckles. She probably memorized that one sentence, said a guy from IT, sipping juice from a plastic cup. Total luck, added an HR analyst. Maybe she lived with a French speaker, probably just copying. But Jonathan stayed silent. Unlike the others, he didn't doubt what he had seen. It wasn't memorization. It wasn't luck. It was fluency. It was mastery. It was something much greater. Meanwhile, Sofia returned to her floor, just as calm as before. During her break, she pulled out the red notebook and wrote down a new word the visitor had said, orientation. She circled it with fine lines and translated it into 3 languages. Then she closed the notebook, put it away carefully, and resumed cleaning the conference room glass. It was just another day, but something had shifted. Jonathan began to quietly look for her in the hallways. He noticed how she moved with subtlety, how she seemed to listen more than she spoke. He saw her help a new employee find the HR department in nearly flawless English, and how she corrected a misspelled Spanish term on a whiteboard left by interns. Each gesture deepened his curiosity. Who was this woman? Why didn't anyone seem to notice her? And perhaps most unsettling of all, how many other talents had this company overlooked simply because it didn't know how to see The next morning, Jonathan asked his assistant to confirm the name of the morning shift. Cleaning staff member. She answered almost automatically, Sofia Morales. She's new here, I think it's been about 8 months. Jonathan didn't say a word. He simply nodded. Looking out the window, down below, Sofia walked through the filtered morning light, pushing her cart and wiping the glass of a revolving door. And in that moment he knew that woman carried an entire world within her. A world that almost no one there could ever begin to understand. But he would, or at least he'd try. In the days that followed, Sofia Morales returned to her usual routine, punctual, discreet, tireless. She cleaned the hallways before the workday began, replaced the recycled paper in the meeting rooms, and quietly scrubbed the forgotten coffee stains from the plush carpets of the executive offices. It was as if the incident with the lost Frenchman had never happened. But there were eyes on her now. Some suspicious, others mocking, a few truly observant. Behind the scenes at Northbridge, rumors of the multilingual janitor made their way from desk to desk like a low, persistent hum. Some found it amusing, others rolled their eyes. For many, it was nothing more than an odd little story to fill a coffee break. It wouldn't surprise me if she just memorized that line, a marketing manager said. Or maybe she took some online course. These days, anyone can say a few words in French. She's Latina, right? Spanish, we expect. But French? I don't know, whispered another with a crooked smile. There was an invisible line, and Sofia had crossed it, not out of arrogance, but simply by existing in a way that didn't fit the mold they had assigned her. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pierce kept watching in silence. He didn't mention the incident to the executive board. He didn't make a note in any report. But something about the way Sofia had spoken that morning, the care with which she guided the visitor, kept echoing in his mind. During a meeting with department leaders, he let a question slip. Do we have any kind of internal training or upskilling? Policy for our cleaning or maintenance staff? The looks around the table shifted from surprise to thinly veiled discomfort. The outsourced company handles that. Sir, replied Richard Donovan, the head of HR with a controlled smile. They're not part of our permanent staff. Our training focuses on operational and strategic talent. Operational talent, Jonathan wrote down the phrase. Later that same day, he walked slowly through the lobby. He spotted Sofia cleaning the glass walls of a side hallway. The scene was simple. Gloves on her hands, a damp cloth, earbuds in, calm and precise movements. But what truly caught his attention was what she did during her break. Sofia would sit near the locker room, waste no time and open a red notebook, its cover worn and covered in faded stickers. She'd turn the pages carefully, analyzing columns of words written in different alphabets. She'd silently repeat phrases. She was studying, alone, without applause, without recognition. Jonathan watched from a distance, not wanting to disturb her. There was a rare kind of discipline in her, a quiet elegance, a hunger for knowledge that far exceeded any assigned role. Upstairs, the perception was very different. Some employees viewed Sofia's behavior as suspicious. Others labeled her as showy. These immigrants always feel the need to prove they're better than everyone, muttered a senior legal analyst with a sharp tone. She just wants attention, added another. If she wants to speak French, she should go do it in a classroom, not here. Sofia overheard fragments of it all, but said nothing. Over the years, she had learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than any reply. But deep down, it hurt. Not because of others' doubt, but because of the echo of old wounds. She had heard this before, in different places, wearing different clothes, at university, when she became the first woman in her family to graduate. At the airport, carrying her baby and her dignity strapped tightly to her waist. And now, once again, inside a glass building where everyone believed themselves to be modern, yet still clung to ancient beliefs about who deserves to be heard. That Friday, Sofia was cleaning one of the training rooms when she saw a poorly printed report on a table filled with badly translated Spanish notes, basic errors, nonsensical phrases. She felt a slight, almost invisible urge to correct them, but she pulled back. Instead, She opened her notebook and quietly wrote, "El conocimiento no tiene uniforme." Knowledge doesn't wear a uniform. She closed the notebook carefully and returned to her work. Jonathan, meanwhile, had decided he didn't want to rely on hallway gossip. He requested a discreet report on the cleaning staff, their backgrounds, languages spoken, registered roles. The data was thin. No one knew anything about Sofia, just her name, age, and employee badge number. That confirmed what he already suspected. No one had ever cared enough to ask. And that evening, watching the sun's reflection bounce off the elevator mirrors, Jonathan made a decision. He needed to get to know Sofia Morales, not as the company saw her, but as she truly was. The Albany Park neighborhood smelled of fresh bread in the morning and had standstill traffic by late afternoon. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find on a Chicago postcard, but real life pulsed there in the smallest details. The corner laundromat that also sold Mexican ice cream, the barbershop blasting old salsa tunes, the elderly Korean woman watering plants on her windowsill. That was where Sofia Morales lived with her 12-year-old daughter, Elena. The apartment was small, just a bedroom and a living room combined, but neat and cared for with the same attention. Sofia gave to the corporate floors of Northbridge, handmade floral curtains, a DIY bookshelf built with cement blocks and wooden planks, and a wall filled with sticky notes, poems, and colorful maps. In the tiny kitchen, the aromas blended together. Colombian coffee, rice with cilantro, and discounted American bread from the corner store. At night, when the building finally fell quiet, mother and daughter dove into parallel routines. Elena did her homework at the living room table, while Sofia sat on her folded mattress and opened the red notebook. Time moved differently there. She flipped through pages filled over the years, vocabulary lists in French, idioms in Arabic, Chinese proverbs, Portuguese grammar rules, and scribbled Japanese phrases with handwritten translations. Each language had its own color: blue for German, purple for Turkish, green for Spanish. Homemade markers made from magazine cutouts helped her stay organized. Sofia studied like someone stitching memories. It was her way of resisting, of reminding herself that what she knew had worth, even if the world refused to see it. With her phone resting inside a glass cup to amplify the sound, she listened to interviews with linguists, documentaries on etymology, and podcast episodes about endangered languages. Sometimes she whispered phrases quietly to herself, careful not to wake Elena. Other times, she hummed a folk song she had learned years ago while visiting an Armenian village during an academic conference, a past that now felt far away, almost unreal. But none of it was random. Sofia followed a meticulous routine. A simple chart taped to the wall outlined her study hours, weekly themes and languages to review. On Saturdays, she read excerpts from books borrowed from the public library. On Sundays, she watched international films with layered subtitles, challenging herself not to rely on translations. She was a relentless autodidact. To the neighbors, she was just a Latin American woman, a single mom, a cleaning lady. But within that small room, Sofia was a linguist, an educator, a living bridge between cultures. And Elena knew it. The girl watched her mother with quiet admiration. Sometimes, she pretended to be asleep just to hear her whisper Japanese sentences or mentally correct French conjugations. One night, after a simple dinner of soup and toast, Elena asked, "Mom, have you ever thought about teaching again?" Sofia smiled but took her time before answering. "I think about it every day, sweetheart, but sometimes, before you can open the door again, you have to rebuild the key." Elena didn't fully understand, but she held on to those words like a prayer. The following Monday, Sofia woke up before her alarm. She made breakfast calmly, fixed her daughter's hair, and left a note in her lunchbox. "You can learn any language in the world, as long as you believe in yourself." But as she walked to the bus stop, the Chicago wind sliced through the streets like a blade, but she kept moving forward. The sky was still dark, and the city buildings were starting to light up in shades of gold. She carried her red notebook in her bag, wrapped in a plastic sleeve, like a sacred object. At work, the hallways were quieter than usual. Many still avoided eye contact with her, whether out of prejudice or discomfort. But Sofia didn't mind. She had long since learned that dignity doesn't depend on an audience. She passed by the executive cafe, cleaned the reception area, and emptied the trash bins in the legal department. In one of the meeting rooms, she came across a stack of reports in French, filled with clumsy notes. She resisted the urge to fix them. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Les mots ne mentent pas, mais ceux qui ignorent les mots se perdent." Words don't lie, but those who ignore them get lost. Then she closed the page. At that very moment upstairs, Jonathan Pierce was reading a file with barely any information. Sofia Morales, Colombian immigrant, employed 8 months ago. Higher education not listed. He looked out the window deep in thought. He didn't know everything she carried, but he was determined to find out. The meeting room on the 8th floor, where Sofia often cleaned, had a view of Lake Michigan. In winter, the water looked like a vast, motionless sheet of gray, as if it were frozen not just by the temperature, but by everything people inside the building preferred to ignore. It was a polished boardroom with glass walls, fresh carpeting, and a fancy Italian coffee maker no one really knew how to use. And it would become the setting for one of the most subtle and painful moments of discrimination Sofia would face that week. It all started in an elevator. On Tuesday, around 8:10 a.m., Sofia was taking the service elevator up to the 8th floor, pushing her cleaning cart like she did every morning. Her uniform was spotless, headphones hanging around her neck, her face calm. The doors opened on the 6th floor, and 2 junior executives from the partnerships department stepped in, both blonde, heels clicking, coffee cups in hand. As the doors closed, one of them wrinkled her nose discreetly. There's a strong smell in here today," she murmured, glancing sideways. The other laughed with a hint of condescension. "Must be that exotic soap from the Latin market." Sofia said nothing. She kept her eyes on the elevator display, watching the floors light up. When the doors opened, they stepped out first, one of them added, chuckling, "She probably thinks it's some kind of cultural charm." The doors closed. Alone, Sofia took a deep breath. Just another wound among so many others. Microaggressions that piled up like invisible dust. Beneath the company's pristine rug, sharp remarks disguised as jokes. Looks that underestimated. Whispered comments carrying centuries of judgment. But that same day, the blow would come more directly and more publicly. Just before lunch, a group of foreign visitors arrived for a strategic meeting with the board. Sofia was finishing up cleaning the hallway when she heard the muffled sound of English mixed with Russian. She stepped aside discreetly, as she always did, careful not to interrupt. That's when one of the guests, seemingly looking for the restroom, approached her. "Excuse me, miss. Do you know where the restrooms are?" She answered politely. "Yes, sir. Just go down this hallway and turn left. The men's room is the second door." The response was clear, kind, and precise, but almost instantly. Richard Donovan, the head of HR, appeared from around the corner, like a shadow emerging from the wall. "Morales," he called, loud and sharp, his voice echoing down the corridor. "I need to speak with you now." She approached calmly. "Yes, sir? You've already been told not to engage with visitors," he said sternly. "You're not here for cultural distractions." A few employees turned their heads. Others pretended not to hear. Sofia looked at him for a moment. She could have defended herself. She could have explained, but she chose silence. She simply nodded with respect and returned to her duties. The words lingered for hours. Cultural distractions. Later, in the maintenance room, she washed her hands in silence. A coworker approached. "What was that in the hallway? Why did he speak to you like that?" Sofia shrugged. "He thinks the language I carry is noise, that my voice is just a distraction." The coworker shook her head in disbelief. "That's discrimination." But Sofia only smiled, the serene kind of smile worn by someone who has survived far worse. That night at home, Elena noticed her mother was quieter than usual. "Are you okay?" "I am," Sofia replied after a pause. "I just had to remind myself. The world isn't always ready for what it doesn't understand." While Elena took her shower, Sofia opened her red notebook and wrote at the top of a new page, "My voice is not a distraction. It is a translation of existence." Below that, she translated the sentence into French, Arabic, Portuguese, and Japanese. More than ever, she felt that notebook wasn't just a collection of words. It was her silent scream, her manifesto, her refuge. The next day, when she returned to work, the stares remained the same. But something in Sofia had shifted. Her steps were firm. Her silence was no longer submission, it was intention. And she knew with quiet certainty that sooner or later, someone would hear her. That Friday, Northbridge Technologies was buzzing with preparation for a high level, meeting with a delegation from the Middle East. Diplomats and trade representatives from Lebanon, invited to discuss a potential international partnership. The executive team was on high alert. The protocol required discretion, elegance, and flawless interpretation. Though the company had scheduled official interpreters for the event, no one expected the delegation to arrive so early. They showed up just after lunch. 4 men in dark suits, one of them an older gentleman with olive-toned skin, gray hair, and a calm demeanor. As they were being welcomed in the reception area, Sofia was quietly mopping the marble floor nearby, just close enough to hear. She recognized the language instantly, Levantine Arabic, spoken with a warm, lyrical Lebanese accent. The words flowed like music to her ears, like a memory that had never left. One of the visitors gestured toward the elevator, clearly confused, and asked the security guard something. The man hesitated, unsure, and simply shook his head, embarrassed. Sofia didn't think twice. She set the bucket aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached gently. "Odran, هل تبحث عن الطابق الثامن?" "Excuse me, are you looking for the 8th floor?" she asked, her pronunciation clear and graceful. The man paused. He looked at her in surprise, then smiled, grateful. "Naam, الطابق الثامن, shukran jazilan." "Yes, the 8th floor, thank you so much." She returned the smile and responded naturally. "يمكنني أن أرافقكم إن أردتم." "I can accompany you if you'd like." The exchange lasted less than a minute, but it was long enough to draw suspicious glances. Among them, Richard Donovan's, the HR director, had just stepped out of a nearby meeting room. His expression tightened the moment he saw them. He walked over quickly, interrupting the interaction abruptly. "Morales," he said in a low, clipped tone, "we've already talked about your role at this company. This is not appropriate." The diplomat, sensing the shift, stepped in, speaking in English. "She was very helpful, sir. Very kind." Richard forced a formal smile, brushing it off. "I'm sure. But we already have translators." "Thank you." Sofia lowered her gaze, holding on to her dignity like armor. She nodded discreetly, gave a polite wave, and returned to her work without another word. The diplomat watched her for a few more seconds, then quietly said something to his colleagues, casting a subtle look of disapproval in Richard's direction. As the group entered the elevator, Richard muttered under his breath, "This isn't a community center." Sofia heard him, but she didn't respond. Back in the maintenance room, she pulled her red notebook from her bag with steady hands. She sat on the wooden bench near the lockers and, with her delicate handwriting, wrote down the word of the day, intervention, translated into 4 languages. She replaced every period with an ellipsis, then closed the notebook as if sealing a promise. Later that afternoon, Jonathan Pierce heard about the incident by chance. One of the diplomats during the official meeting praised the employee who welcomed them so kindly and spoke perfect Arabic. The comment caught his attention immediately. The employee?" Jonathan asked. "From which department?" "A woman in a gray uniform. I believe she's part of the cleaning staff." The CEO didn't hide his surprise. His mind flashed back to the previous week, to Sofia speaking French with the African guest. And now, Arabic? It was undeniable. There was something there, something far greater than met the eye. When the meeting ended, he passed by reception, but Sofia was no longer there. That night, in the quiet of their apartment, Sofia was making dinner when Elena asked, "Mom, why does that man from work treat you badly?" Sofia paused for a moment. Because sometimes knowing too much, coming from where I come from, makes people uncomfortable. But you were just trying to help." Not everyone understands when help comes from someone invisible. That night, while reviewing her weekly languages, Sofia drew 3 circles in her notebook, one with the symbol for listening, one with the word puente, bridge, and one with her name, written in Arabic, at the center of the page. It was her way of continuing, of moving forward, even when the world tried to silence her. The morning after the episode with the Lebanese diplomats, Sofia Morales arrived at Northbridge earlier than usual. The air was thick and damp, the kind of humidity that seeps into your bones and your thoughts. But she walked with purpose, as always, pushing her cleaning cart in steady rhythm. Her face serene, though inside a quiet storm brewed. Something had shifted within her. It wasn't anger. She'd moved past anger long ago. It was something else, kind of deep, ancient weariness, mixed with a silent certainty. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Still, she felt that something had to be recorded. Something had to be remembered. And so, when she arrived at the maintenance room, before even putting on her gloves, she reached into her bag and pulled out the red notebook. She sat on the wooden bench, took a deep breath, and with her fine-tipped blue pen, wrote at the top of a new page, interpreter. Just that, and beneath it, she wrote the word again in English, French, Arabic, and Japanese. Then she drew a horizontal line beneath each version. A simple line, but one heavy with meaning. As if saying to herself, I know who I am, even if they don't. She closed the notebook with care, as if closing a chapter. Then she put on her gloves, tied her hair up, and went back to work. She cleaned the 8th floor conference room in silence, as she always did. But now, every gesture felt more grounded. It wasn't just cleaning, it was declaration. Mid-morning, she passed Richard Donovan in the hallway. He walked by quickly, pretending not to see her. She didn't speak either. She had decided she would no longer shine for those who only saw dust. As she left the room, Sofia paused for a moment in front of one of the large windows. Outside, cars moved like rushing ants, and the cloudy sky created a kind of suspension, as if something was about to happen. But not just yet. At that same moment, up on the executive floor, Jonathan Pierce flipped through documents, still thinking about the cleaning woman, who had spoken French and Arabic so effortlessly. His curiosity was slowly becoming something else, a quiet urgency. Who was Sofia Morales, really? Why had the company never known? How many other talents were hiding behind silent ID badges? While Jonathan scanned reports for answers that wouldn't come, Sofia gathered her supplies for the 3rd floor restrooms. That's when she overheard 2 employees chatting in the break room, laughing to themselves. Dude, I swear, they said the cleaning lady speaks Arabic now. What's next, Latin? Nah, soon she'll be teaching ancient Greek in the locker room. More laughter. More mockery. Sofia pretended not to hear. But when she entered the empty restroom, she closed the door, placed her hands on the sink, and stared into the mirror. There she was. A mature face, dark eyes, a tired expression, and unshakable, she smiled. Not sarcastically, but with the quiet pride of someone who knows her worth, even if no one else sees it. Later during her break, she pulled out the notebook again. At the bottom of the page, she added a small note. An interpreter doesn't just translate words, they translate worlds. And below that, as a personal reminder, she wrote, I'm not asking permission to be who I am. That evening, when she got home, she found Elena sitting barefoot on the couch with an atlas open on her lap. Look, Mom, today I learned about Lebanon. Did you know they speak both Arabic and French there? Sofia sat beside her, surprised. Yes, it's a land where languages intertwine, full of sounds that dance together. Have you ever been there? Not yet, but I've heard voices from there. Elena looked at her with soft admiration. Someday I'll travel with you to all the places you can speak. Sofia smiled, hugging her daughter tightly. Then I better keep learning, right? The girl nodded. And in that moment, Sofia understood something profound. What she was doing, quietly, day after day, and wasn't just for herself. It was for Elena, for her daughter, for the next generation, for the bridge that one day wouldn't need to be built because it would already exist, alive within her. That night, The red notebook, carefully tucked away, wasn't just a journal of words. It was a map, and Sofia knew exactly where it was taking her. The main conference room at Northbridge, located on the 10th floor, was eerily quiet. For the first time in months, the space felt smaller than it really was. The marble table reflected the harsh ceiling lights, and the senior executive sat rigid, exchanging uneasy glances. At the head of the table, Jonathan Pierce scanned documents, his brow slightly furrowed. The meeting with the Japanese delegation, one that promised billions in investment to expand into East Asia, was about to begin. But an unexpected problem had just derailed the plan. The official interpreter had failed to show up. Traffic, a logistical error, perhaps a misunderstanding. The truth was, no one could reach them. And in this kind of meeting, every second mattered. "Do we have anyone on staff who speaks Japanese?" Jonathan asked, trying to remain composed. "Not at an advanced level, sir," replied a project assistant. "Just basic knowledge." And the Tokyo team didn't arrive in time. Richard Donovan was already rubbing his temples in frustration. This is a disaster." The Japanese guests waited just outside the door. Calm in appearance, but tension filled the air. Even without translation, the break in protocol was obvious. The silence buzzed like electricity, moments from snapping. Jonathan stood up. "No. We need someone to think outside the box. We cannot let this meeting fail." Just then, a quiet voice came from the back of the room. It was one of the receptionists. Young, unsure, but brave enough to speak. "Mr. Pierce, there's someone who might be able to help." "Oh, Mrs. Morales, from the cleaning staff. I once heard her speaking Japanese with one of the maintenance visitors, and, well, I've heard her speak other languages too. She seems to understand a lot more than she lets on." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Bring her in now." Minutes later, Sofia entered the room. Wearing her usual uniform, hair pinned back, rubber gloves still in her pockets. She walked toward the table with steady steps, though her heart was pounding. Nearly every executive in the room watched her with suspicion. Richard was the first to speak. Tone sharp. "This is insane. A cleaning woman in a high-level negotiation?" But Jonathan cut him off gently. "She's just going to help us, Richard. If it works, great. If not, we'll find another solution." He turned to Sofia, voice soft. "Mrs. Morales, would you feel comfortable assisting us with translation?" She took a breath. "Yes, sir. If you'll allow me a few moments to review the terms in the documents." Jonathan nodded. One of the analysts handed her the meeting agenda, written in technical Japanese. Sofia sat down beside the table, opened the red notebook she always carried, and with remarkable calm began reviewing the terms, her fingers gliding over the notes. The room was silent. 5 minutes later she stood. "I'm ready." The Japanese delegation entered. Formal greetings were exchanged, and then Sofia began to translate. With a firm voice and precise tone, she led the meeting's opening. She translated each technical term smoothly, adapting cultural expressions with care. When one of the delegates used a traditional metaphor about business, Sofia didn't just understand it. She offered an American equivalent. That brought nods and smiles. For nearly an hour, she bridged two worlds. Jonathan watched in awe. The executives, once doubtful, now looked at her differently. Some with silent shame. Richard Donovan said nothing. When the meeting ended, the head of the Japanese delegation stood, turned to Sofia and gave a slight, respectful bow. She returned the gesture humbly. The investors left satisfied. Jonathan smiled, visibly relieved. "Mrs. Morales, I don't know what we would have done without you." Sofia smiled, calm and composed. "I simply did what I know how to do." She left the room in silence, and for the first time, everyone else remained silent too. Back in the locker room alone, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Today, I didn't need to shout to be heard. I was a bridge." And then she translated, "I was a bridge. Yo fui un puente. Unto Gisran, Shehosni Natta." And in that simple, intimate, powerful gesture, Sofia Morales at last was beginning to be seen. The morning after the meeting with the Japanese investors, the Northbridge building was filled with a rare kind of energy, curious silence. There was something in the air, something people couldn't quite explain. a hushed murmur, as if everyone knew they were about to witness something. But no one knew exactly what. Jonathan Pierce arrived early as usual. But this time, his expression was different, determined, resolute. He carried a slim leather folder and a brown envelope. He went up to the 10th floor, spoke briefly with his assistant, and then sent out an email to the entire company. Subject: General Meeting, Auditorium, 10 a.m. Few words, no explanation. The auditorium filled within minutes. From interns to senior managers, IT staff to operations. Even Richard Donovan, in his pressed suit, sat in the front row with his arms crossed and a tight expression. Sofia Morales was on the 8th floor when she got the message. A co-worker from the cleaning team commented, "Looks serious." Everyone's heading down. Sofia didn't respond. She was cleaning the glass wall of a conference room with steady movements, as if the news had nothing to do with her. But deep down, something in her already knew. Shortly after, a receptionist appeared at the door. "Mrs. Morales, Mr. Pierce asked for you to come to the auditorium, personally." Sofia turned slowly. "Is something wrong?" "He just said it's important and that you deserve to be there." She nodded, a knot in her throat. She took off her gloves, adjusted the scarf around her neck, and headed down the stairs, step by step, holding her breath, not knowing what to expect. When she entered the auditorium, all eyes turned to her, some curious, others stunned, many ashamed. Sofia walked to the side of the stage. Jonathan was waiting there, with a calm but steady smile. He took the microphone, looked at the audience, and began. "Good morning, everyone. I asked you all to gather here today for a simple but essential reason. Because it's time we recognize something, or rather, someone who's been invisible for far too long." A quiet murmur spread across the room. Jonathan continued, "In recent weeks, you've all heard stories. Some true, some distorted. But yesterday, during our meeting with the Japanese delegation, we witnessed undeniable proof of what happens when we choose to listen before we judge." He paused. "I want to introduce someone many of you know, but few have truly seen. A woman who speaks 9 languages fluently, self-taught, resilient, and who, just yesterday, saved a multi-million-dollar international negotiation with her intelligence, her dignity, and her quiet courage." As Sofia stood still beside the stage, her gaze steady, though her eyes shimmered. Please welcome with the respect she deserves, Sofia Morales." The auditorium fell silent for a moment. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then stronger, then standing. Sofia took a deep breath, walked to center stage, and for a moment, seemed smaller in front of the crowd. But as soon as she took the microphone, something shifted. Her posture, her voice, her eyes. Thank you," she said simply. "But I didn't do anything more than what I've always known how to do. The only difference is that this time I was allowed to show it." Applause again, but this time with emotion. Jonathan then revealed the brown envelope. "As of today, Sofia Morales is officially taking on the role of intercultural communication consultant at Northbridge Technologies. She will also be responsible for developing an internal program focused on linguistic and cultural diversity across all departments." Shock appeared on some faces, but also discreet tears, recognition, embarrassment, relief. Richard Donovan couldn't hide his discomfort, but Jonathan was clear, and in alignment with the values we claim to uphold. "I'm also announcing that Mr. Donovan will be placed on temporary leave pending the completion of an internal audit regarding discriminatory behavior." A deep silence settled over the room. Jonathan concluded, "Here we build bridges, not walls." Sofia stepped down from the stage to genuine applause. In the hallways, co-workers who once looked away now came to shake her hand. Some apologized. Others simply said, "I didn't know." And she replied with the same calm as always, "Now you do." Back in the locker room alone, she sat down and opened her red notebook. She wrote with graceful penmanship, "Today, my voice was heard, not for being loud, but for standing still." Then she translated, "Today, my voice was heard, not for being loud, but for standing still. Hoy mi voz fue escuchada." no por gritar, sino por resistir. اليوم سمع صوتي ليس لكونه صاخبا بل لأنه كان ثابتا. 今日は声を張り上げたからではなく、静かに戻っていたからこそ聞いてもらえた。And then she smiled for the first time in a long while, not with resignation, but with belonging. News spread quickly through the halls of Northbridge Technologies. Richard Donovan, for years one of the most feared and respected names in human resources, had been suspended. Officially, pending investigation for conduct inconsistent with the company's values. But no one needed a statement to know what it meant. The whispers were inevitable. Did you see Jonathan's email? Jim, finally someone stood up to Donovan. And all because of that meeting with the cleaning lady. The cleaning lady, now intercultural communication consultant, had a new badge and her own office on the 7th floor. Still modest, just a simple desk, a computer, and an empty bookshelf, soon to be filled with dictionaries and linguistics books. Sofia Morales no longer wore the grey uniform. Now she dressed in elegant, comfortable business casual. But her gaze, that steady, serene gaze of someone who carries an ocean inside, hadn't changed a bit. Jonathan Pierce personally oversaw every step of the transition. He held meetings with leadership across departments, introduced Sofia's role as a symbol of structural change, and launched a new internal initiative, Languages That Liberate, a program dedicated to celebrating linguistic diversity, cultural empathy, and dismantling structural bias within the company. We're going to listen, he said during the launch, but truly listen. We're going to turn differences into bridges. And who better to lead that than someone who was ignored for so long, yet never stopped trying to teach? Sofia took the microphone with her usual grace, calm, clear, without pretense. The most universal language is respect, she said, and silence speaks too. What happened to me isn't an exception. It's a reflection of a system that needs to learn to hear what it's long refused to acknowledge. Applause echoed through the room, but it wasn't just recognition. It was discomfort, reflection, a call to action. The first cultural workshops led by Sofia began that same week. In a large room on the 8th floor, employees from different departments sat side by side for a simple exercise. Describe a personal object in their native language. Many were shy. Some were moved, and for the first time, a few heard the sound of their childhood without fear of being judged. Sofia led the sessions with warmth and purpose. She explained concepts of intercultural communication, spoke about linguistic metaphors, about the music within words, and she told stories, not about herself, but about the many other Sofias in the world who knew so much, yet never got the chance to show it. Little by little, change began to take shape. Posters with phrases in multiple languages appeared in the hallways. The meeting room she once cleaned was renamed Global Listening Room. Even from a distance, Richard Donovan watched it all unfold with resentment. He tried to contact internal allies, suggest retaliation, claim overreaction. But then the testimonies started to surface. Old incidents, forgotten ones, suppressed ones, all finally being heard. An intern spoke about racist jokes. A black marketing employee revealed she'd been told to hide her hair before a pitch meeting. A Vietnamese assistant said her pronunciation had been mocked during a presentation. Jonathan didn't flinch. He led the audit with rigor, and Sofia, without asking for it, became the symbol of the company's ethical turning point. One afternoon, as she was preparing materials for the next workshop, she received an unexpected visit. Amanda Lee, one of the executives who used to avoid her in the elevators. I came to apologize, Amanda said sincerely. I never thought about what you carried. I only saw the uniform. Sofia smiled. The uniform was never the problem. The way you looked at it was. Amanda nodded. And right there, without ceremony, new possibilities were born. At the end of that week, Jonathan gathered the leadership team once again. What we're building now isn't just a policy, it's a culture. And if we want to attract brilliant minds, we need to start by valuing the ones we already have. Sofia watched it all carefully. She knew real change took time, but she could already see something new in people's eyes: curiosity, humility, a willingness to learn. That night at home, she opened her red notebook and wrote, "When the structure shifts, silence learns how to speak." And beside it she drew a simple image, a bridge being crossed by different people, coming from opposite directions, but all heading the same way. Elena passed behind her, peeked over her shoulder, and said, "It's looking beautiful, Mom." Sofia gently closed the notebook. "We're starting to write a new chapter, sweetheart, and this time, it won't be erased." It was hard to believe it had only been a month since Sofia Morales left the grey uniform behind. Now she walked through the halls of Northbridge, technologies in elegant business casual clothing, folders tucked under her arm, carrying a calmness that didn't come from her job title, but from the quiet certainty of who she was, with or without any position. The looks had changed, no longer hurried, suspicious or dismissive. There was now a different kind of attention, genuine. People made room for her in the elevator, greeted her with respect, waited for her to finish speaking before responding. Small gestures. But to Sofia, it was like watching concrete crack open so something green could grow through. On the 7th floor, her new office was slowly taking on her identity. Books in various languages filled the shelves. A framed quote on the wall read, "Words build worlds." And on the desk, in a place of honor, sat her old red notebook, now adorned with colorful ribbons marking key pages. She never kept it far. During lunch breaks, Sofia used the time to prepare the upcoming cultural workshops. These sessions had become the most anticipated moments in the company, not just for the novelty, but for their human impact. People who once barely said hello now shared stories, traditional dishes, childhood songs. One afternoon, a guy from IT shared a proverb in Farsi he learned from his grandmother. A contract analyst revealed her grandfather spoke Haitian Creole. A Filipino intern brought homemade dumplings from her mom for everyone to try. In the last session, a quiet man from finance raised his hand, visibly moved. "I never thought I'd have the courage to speak about my roots. My family always taught me to hide them, but now I don't think I have to anymore." Sofia smiled. When we stay silent out of fear, a language dies a little. When we speak with respect, it comes back to life. The room erupted in spontaneous applause, not out of formality, but out of gratitude. Jonathan watched it all from afar, deeply pleased. The following week marked another milestone. The conference room on the 8th floor, the same one Sofia used to clean every day, was renamed. A sleek glass plaque was installed next to the door. Global Listening Room, in honor of Sofia Morales. The news spread throughout the company with excitement. Sofia was invited to the official unveiling, but hesitated for a moment. "Isn't this too much?" she asked Jonathan. "It's the least we can do," he replied. "Sometimes what feels like too much is just what's been denied for too long." On the day of the ceremony, the room was packed. Beside the plaque stood Elena and other employees, family members invited for the occasion. Sofia wore a navy blue blouse and a floral scarf, the same one she wore when everything began. Her eyes wandered through the space she once scrubbed in silence, wiping away coffee rings and hurried footprints. Now her mark was permanent. Elena watched her with eyes full of light. It wasn't just pride, it was recognition. For the first time, she saw her mother being seen the way she had always seen her. Sofia took her daughter's hand before speaking. "For a long time, I walked these halls unseen. Today, I'm not here to celebrate a promotion. I'm here to remind us that what we build in silence can one day echo." Applause. After the event, Jonathan approached and handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" "An invitation," he said. "The International Committee for Linguistic Innovation is hosting a conference in New York. They want to hear your story. They want to listen to you." Sofia took a moment to respond. Then she smiled. "So, it's finally time to speak out loud." Later, alone in her office, she opened the red notebook. Slowly she wrote, "I was heard. But before that, I learned to hear myself too." And beside it, for the first time in months, she wrote in her native Colombian Spanish, not as a translation, but as origin, "Hoy no limpio oficinas. Hoy limpio silencios." "Today I don't clean offices. Today I clean silence." She closed the notebook. On the other side of the glass, Elena stood in the doorway, watching her silently smiling. Sofia motioned gently. "Want to come in?" The girl ran to her and sat on the floor beside the desk. And there, between underlined phrases and translated words, mother and daughter began writing a new chapter without erasing any of the ones that came before. That Saturday morning, the sky over Chicago was clear. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and a rare kind of peace filled Sofia Morales' apartment, the peace of someone who knew a cycle had come full circle. She woke early, as always. But unlike other days, she didn't put on her uniform, didn't prepare lesson materials, didn't open her laptop. She simply brewed 2 coffees, set the table with care, and sat on the couch with a cardboard box in her lap. Elena, now 13, still drowsy, stepped out of her room and frowned. "No workshop today?" Sofia smiled. "Today is something else." The girl approached, curious. She sat next to her mother and stared at the box. Sofia opened it carefully. Inside were years' worth of words, postcards with Russian notes, loose pages with Japanese characters, maps covered in scribbled vocabulary, small notebooks with proverbs in African dialects, and at the very bottom, the red notebook. "What is all this, Mom?" "It's my world, and now it's yours too." Sofia flipped through a few pages delicately, showing her daughter passages she had never seen. There were scribbles written on planes, sentences jotted down during bathroom breaks in shopping malls, words copied from strangers' mouths, translations made in the still hours of the night while Elena slept. She pointed to a yellowed page, had stained by a drop of water. "Si el mundo no te escucha, escribe. Un día alguien va a leer." If the world doesn't listen, write. One day someone will read. This is where it all started, Sofia said. Writing what I wanted to scream. Elena ran her fingers over the words, like touching a secret. But why are you showing me this now?" Sofia took a deep breath. "Because what I've built has roots now, and it's time for wings." The girl's eyes widened. "You're leaving the company?" "Not yet, but one day, yes. And when that day comes, I want to leave behind more than manuals or slides. I want to leave." Meaning, she closed the notebook and handed it to her daughter. "I've already opened the doors I needed to. Now it's your turn to walk through them." Elena hesitated. "What if I don't know what to do with all this?" Sofia smiled. "Then start the way I did, by listening. The rest comes with time." That afternoon, mother and daughter walked to the public library. Elena picked out 3 books, one on indigenous cultures of Latin America, one on Arabic calligraphy, and one of Korean poems in translation. They sat in the nearby park and shared a sandwich, while Sofia flipped through an old linguistics book. She noticed a young immigrant boy trying to speak to the librarian. His Spanish was choppy, mixed with Guarani. The woman behind the counter looked lost. Sofia stepped in gently and translated with patience, helping him find the book he was looking for. Back on the bench, Elena looked at her in awe. "Bah, you're still a little bit magical, you know." Sofia chuckled softly. "Magic, my love, is just patient listening." The following week, a new sign appeared beside the notice board in Northbridge's lobby. "Languages that liberate, now open to employees' children." It was Elena's suggestion and Sofia's promise. Once a month, the company would open its doors for workshops aimed at employees' children, multilingual story time, storytelling sessions, word games, a space where diversity stopped being theory and became childhood. At the first event, Sofia wore a light blue blouse and her favorite scarf. She welcomed over 40 children from all backgrounds, and in the center of the room, with a wide smile, Elena introduced, "And now my mom will tell us a story, but not in just one language. In 3, Sofia looked at all those eager faces, small ears ready to listen, and she understood at last that her greatest legacy wasn't the languages she spoke, but the hearts she reached. At the end of the session, a 7-year-old girl came up with a drawing in hand. "I drew you with a book. You look like a teacher from another planet." Sofia knelt down to her level. "Maybe I am. A planet full of words." They laughed together. Later, while packing up, Sofia opened the red notebook one last time that week. She wrote in bold, "Steady handwriting, the most important language I ever taught was the language of listening." And beside it, for the first time, she didn't translate, because she knew that now, not everything needs to be spoken to be understood. For a long time, Sofia was invisible, not because she lacked light, but because no one bothered to see it. She never asked for recognition, never demanded attention. She simply kept going, day after day, cleaning rooms, learning languages, writing words the world didn't want to hear. And then one moment, a crisis, a meeting on the brink of failure. That's when Sofia's voice broke through the walls. And when they finally listened, she didn't need to raise her voice. She had already become immense in silence. Sofia didn't change who she was. The world finally changed the way it looked at her. Today she teaches, connects, inspires. But her greatest act was handing that red notebook to her daughter, as if to say, "I've already opened the doors. Now it's your turn to walk through them." This story isn't about job titles or corporations. It's about listening, about dignity, and the courage to never let the world decide your worth. How many people like Sofia do you know? How many stories are unfolding right now? In the silence beside you? If this story touched your heart, don't leave without reflecting. Share it, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Because here, every story is an invitation to look deeper, to listen with your heart, and to never again ignore someone who was born to transform. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there might be feeling invisible right now. Someone who needs to be reminded that their worth doesn't depend on someone else's gaze. So share, tell us how it made you feel, and most of all, subscribe to the channel now, because here, every story is a reunion with what's most human in us. And the next one might be yours.